Welcome back to Reinforce the Horse. Today we are here with Adele Shaw, and she is an internationally recognized horsemanship mentor, behavior consultant, and trainer focused on creating a positive relationship between horse and human through science based training and care practices. Drawn to horses labeled as troublemakers and lost causes, from an early age, Adele has always had a passion for understanding the why behind behavior and a deep desire to help horses find their way back to wellness.
So, Adele, thank you so much for joining us today on Reinforce the Horse. We're glad that you're here. And so, we gave you a nice short introduction. Would you like to just kind of fill us in about more about who you are and
Yeah.
why you're here today?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. First of all, I love the name of the podcast because I'm all about reinforcement procedures and all of that. So this is great. Yeah, so my name is Adele Shaw and I'm based in Central Texas. I am a horsemanship mentor, a certified behavior consultant, and a clinician and a horse trainer. And there's a lot more titles and stuff that I could talk about: blogger, podcaster, all of that. Yeah, I like to work with people all over the world that are interested in learning more about, working with their horses in a way that involves positive reinforcement, that involves having a Lima and humane hierarchy approach. I really like working with horses that are considered, problematic or dangerous. I tend to specialize in that area. I like working with aggression cases and dangerous horse kind of cases. Yeah, so I have 7 of my own horses, and I have different client horses that board with me from time to time. But mostly, I do a lot of online virtual coaching and in-person coaching here in Central Texas, as well as clinics. So, and I have a big online like courses and academies and all of that. But yeah, so that's a little bit more about me.
Very cool. So, where did it all begin? Your journey with horses?
Yeah. So where I began was at a summer camp. When I was about 8 years old, I went to a kids riding summer camp. It was so hot. We rode horses throughout the day, and then we would go and like play in the pool and do other stuff in the afternoon. But I just had begged and begged my parents to, get me a horse, to do riding lessons, whatever, something to do with horses. I was like, I'll muck stalls. I don't care. I just want to do something with horses. And I started at a summer camp. And actually, this is where my love of working with, horses that other people didn't really care to work with or be around started. There was a horse there at the summer camp that nobody wanted to be around. Nobody liked him. And I was like, yep, I want to work with that horse. And, at the time it was kind of like, it was more like, oh, I'll be the one to work with the problem horse. And it was a little bit more ego driven, but that gradually morphed into something that's where I am now, where I just really like helping horses and people build that relationship where they want to be together, where the horse is willing and happy, and it's a really positive relationship. And everybody's getting they're both being reinforced by the relationship and the experience and having a good time together. So yeah, it started all the way back in summer camp, and then went to I started riding hunter jumper for a long time. I did that competitively with different horses for many years. And then from there, I moved into dressage and competed in dressage for a long time. Then moved into more of a classical dressage discipline, kind of working with classical dressage, not so competitive anymore because I was taking more of a focus on a classical approach rather than the competitive version of dressage. And then from there, I started exploring doing more like trail riding and Western dressage and, different Western disciplines as well. And then we are about where I am now. So
I remember the summer camp very well because I had no experience with horses and went to the family
Oh
day
yeah.
At the end of the summer camp. And so the old, rough cowboy dude, everybody gets their horse and whatnot, and he kind of chuckled as I go to the horse that he selected for me, and everybody's kind of doing this soft walk through this round pen, and my horse goes right in the middle of the round pen and just stands
Yeah.
there,
It's like, I'm done.
and I'm like, yeah, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know anything about it, and I'm like really just kind of feeling.
So you guys
So
did the
yeah,
summer camp together? That's so cool.
Well, I was in the summer camp for it was like a 2 week long
Mhm.
camp, and at the end of it they had like a family day where they had the
Ah,
parents and younger siblings or whatever come in and do that. But I remember feeling, I mean, the whole time I was there, I was young. I think I was around 8 or 9. Um, and it was this sort of like I was really happy and excited to be around horses. And that was like my first experience with horses. And so them, being really, I guess, shut down, as I would call it nowadays, was to me, I was like, oh, well, that's probably just how every horse is. Um, Seeing it now, I know that that's not how every horse is. What were your thoughts on the summer camp horses, either when you were there and now?
oh man. That's like opening a can of worms. So actually the summer camp that I rode at, it wasn't uncommon for the instructors because, these horses were working all day pretty much. And in hot conditions, right now here in Texas, it's 108 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is about when summer camps were happening. In the real feel, the heat index is closer to like 110 to 115. And so we were doing summer camps in conditions like this. And these horses were tired and shut down and just, their saddles fit terribly. They usually had, bigger bits on, or even if they had mild bits, that all those kids that are sitting on those horses' backs didn't have good equitation. They weren't using their hands right. It was lots of push, pull, kick, hit, all of the stuff. But it wasn't uncommon for the instructors to like chase after the horses to make them go and even throw rocks at them or use a whip or something to make them go for the rider so that the rider could experience, the walk, trot, canter, and then maybe going over a little jump or something. And as a kid, I remember thinking, this horse is really, because I was just really feeding into this idea that horses had to be bullied to work with us, and this is how you dealt with them, and this is how the cowboys worked with them. And we didn't have social media and all of that stuff around, and so I was not exposed to anything other than this. And even in Hollywood, when you're watching all these movies, I mean, you're watching people force laying down horses or running them around round pens. I mean, The Horse Whisperer and similar movies were the ones that we were all watching. And so I remember thinking this was normal, and it was sad and unfortunate. And they would, horses being so stubborn, kick them, make them go, all of that. And I just really bought into it. And I was conditioned from a really early age to believe that this is how it had to be. If I loved horses and wanted to be around horses, this is what it required. And I had to toughen up and get, be more of a bully. And that's really unfortunate because it took me a very, very long time to undo all of that. And I still have old behaviors that show up every once in a while. And I'm like, I don't want that anymore. But, it doesn't ever go away once you've learned it. We just work to try and replace it with new ones as much as we can. So it was a sad experience looking back. But at the time, I remember thinking this is normal.
The word conditioning comes to mind. We're kind of conditioned to believe a certain way, even though in a lot of ways, maybe this has been your experience. So you kind of expressed like you kind of had this inner feeling about you that something isn't right about that process. And you mentioned the word relationship, so how did that play out with you desiring to build a relationship with horses, having that entry debut into horses that was completely different than what it sounds like you've developed now?
Yeah. So it's interesting, and I find it super fascinating. I have three of my own kids now, and I watch their behavior, their natural inclination towards animals and horses in particular. And the other day, my daughter, who is 6, she My mini pony, I have a little mini pony. His name is Finn, and he was doing something. He was just eating grass or something, and she asked him to do something, and I don't even remember exactly what was happening, but I remember my daughter, my 6-year old, turning around and looking at me and saying, "Mom, I need to go get some food," because he was so brave and he was a little bit worried about that. And he was so brave. And I just want to reward that. And I want him to feel happy and comfortable. I want to like show him he's okay. And I didn't tell her any of that. I mean, she's been watching me, but I was like, this is such a natural thing for people. We know from such an early age that food is the great, relationship builder. I mean, even when we're watching people interact with other people, I mean, how many work events have you been to where there's not some sort of food offered, right? There's bagels on the table, or there's snacks and hors d'oeuvres, and or cake, and this is how we all celebrate. We all celebrate around food, and it's just part of our normal social interactions. And even horses interact with food, and they build social interactions around food. They all go and graze together as a herd. They go to the watering hole together as a herd. They dams nurse their foals, and foals look to the dams for food. And it's just a natural part of relationship building. So I remember as a kid really wanting to feed carrots and bring apples to the barn and bring snacks and treats and stuff, and that getting trained out of me pretty quick, because you couldn't feed the horses food, or they'll get pushy, they'll get grumpy, they'll start biting, they'll cause problems. And that was kind of a crushing blow. I was like, I just want to feed the pony, I just want to give him a snack. And so it was really anti kind of what I inherently knew was part of relationship building. And yeah, it was just a very gradual, but also at the same time, kind of it happened very quickly too, like learning how to be assertive and or dominant, or just a bully basically to horses. And that would be the way that I stayed safe around horses. And they told me, whether or not they intended it exactly this way, but this is how everybody kind of came around saying this, was that in order to have a relationship with the horse, you have to be you have to be dominant enough, assertive enough, a bully, and aggressive enough that they will respect you. And then when they respect you, that's when you have the relationship that you're looking for. So I was really determined to have that relationship with the horses that I wanted, that I've been seeing on the Hollywood screens, that I had been reading about. I read all of the Heartland books like 5 times. And I wanted that. And it's so, in our culture, so perpetuated that you have to really be aggressive towards them in order for them to be like, oh, you're a leader worth, respecting and following. And then we would get access to that relationship that we've been dreaming of. And that is definitely very opposite of what I do now.
Was there any particular horse or horses in your life that helped you made that shift from what you were conditioned to believe to where you are now and believing and working with them?
Yes, all of them really in different ways. But there was one mare in particular. Her name was Tiger, and she passed away in 2020. But she was the mare that changed everything for me. Like, I tell people this quite often, that I have a very distinct memory of, and this is like a pivotal moment in my life, where I'm sitting in the saddle on her back in the middle of the arena, just sobbing. And this mare, she was sold to me as a children's safe, husband safe trail horse that wanted to just be a family horse, right? She was a reject barrel racer. And so I bought this mare because, well, long story on that part, but it was a gut, maybe an intuition thing. I don't know what it was, but I saw her out in the pasture. She wasn't even actually really for sale. And I saw her, and I looked at the person that I was there to see, and I was like, what about that one? And he was like, well, I don't think that's who you're looking for, whatever. I'm like, that's okay, just bring her out. And man, I fell head over heels in love with her. It was meant to be. And so I get her home and she started refusing to being caught. It took like 2 hours to catch her out of the pasture. And I called them up, and they're like, oh yeah, we have to lasso her out of the pasture. I'm like, what? You have to lasso this horse out of the pasture and that doesn't tell you something's wrong? But I didn't know. Like, anyway, we went forward, we kept going, and I was like, okay, fine. So I started applying the different techniques that I've been trained with. I had gone through lots of different natural horsemanship programs. I had learned a lot from really good trainers over the years, and applying just all of that knowledge and pulling out every bit that I knew. She also started bolting under saddle. She started rearing. She was also bucking, and she was extremely head shy. Wouldn't let me put the bridle on. Wouldn't let me put the saddle on. Really, super skittish. Anyway, just everything you can imagine was happening. So I remember getting, to a certain point where I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this horse. I can't, nothing's working. All of my old training isn't working. I've tried everything. I've brought out everything that I know. I've been really patient, really calm about this, just trying everything. And thinking that the solutions were I was either going to have to sell her or just keep her and just have her sit in the pasture, which at the time, I knew if I sold her, nothing good would happen because she just was in a bad way already. And then at the time, I was very much of the belief system that a horse that couldn't be ridden really shouldn't, is being wasted, right? That whole kind of idea that a horse that's not working, it doesn't have a job, is wasted and they need to be doing something. So that wasn't an option either. So I was really stuck between a rock and a hard place, according to my own brain and my own conditioning. And this started me exploring, something else, because I was sitting there thinking, I can't do either of those. Like, this isn't going to work. And I love this mare and I'm willing to change. And that's really where everything changed, because I had had previous horses that put me in similar positions where I was dealing with either a dangerous horse or things weren't going well, or there's a lot of different horses in my past where that's kind of come up, especially since I was always drawn to those kinds of horses. But for this particular horse, for whatever reason, all of the different things came together, and it was just the right moment at the right time, and I was in the right place at the right time, and I was just ready. I was ready to try something different. I was so sick and tired of fighting against my horses, of feeling like it was a constant push-pull, that I was constantly having to force them to be around me, that it wasn't something that they wanted to do willingly, which is where the name came from. And so Tiger, that moment and what came afterwards really is what shifted everything. And she's what started, actually, TW, the Willing Equine, started from working with her, and I started exploring everything that I do now from her, and I pursued the route of becoming a certified behavior consultant because of her and all the horses that came before her. So
Amazing.
It is incredible.
Yeah, great. It seems there's usually like one particular horse that, if we're open and willing to listen, there's sort of like a domino effect that takes place after that. And from my thinking, that's kind of like the herd mentality. It's like there's a particular one, it just kind of opens up the floodgates for learning, similar to what happened for me.
yeah.
Was she the one that started your positive reinforcement journey?
Yep, she was.
Incredible.
It was devastating when I lost her. My world kind of shook, fell apart. But she started everything in that regards. And I hadn't done any clicker training before her, any positive reinforcement before her. I was still of the belief that you should never feed a horse treats or food, which I don't feed treats, just for anybody that's listening. I feed food reinforcers, which are usually hay pellets of some kind. People think of treats and think of like really molassesy flavored, high sugar content. We don't use that. Unless it's like for a very specific situation. But she started the positive reinforcement journey for me, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't like a light switch and I was like, yeah, I'm a different person today. No, it was brutal after that for a while. And I really had to be open to learning. I really had to be open to change. And I really had to be ready to be a learner again, to start back to being a novice, because especially as I was already professionally training and teaching lessons at that time, it was a very humbling experience to go, maybe what I thought I knew is not actually right, or the whole picture, or everything that I thought. And so to start from scratch like that is a very humbling experience, but you have to be ready for it.
Yeah, so you expressed the words that I just heard, humility and vulnerability, and sort of this inner drive to do something better. Um, it's been definitely my experience that horses tend to bring that out of us and also encourage us to go deep within. And do you have any thoughts on, even from like a spiritual perspective, um, where the horses might have been indirectly or directly leading you to or from in that way?
Um, it's been actually really interesting. I don't know how deep you want to go on spiritual stuff, but I I'm a Christ follower, Christian, and a believer, and I grew up in a very um very legalistic, authoritarian type upbringing, and my parents were wonderful, but it was just kind of what was, that's what was standard and taught, and that's what they just did what they thought was right, and I was starting to really implement that with my own children because I had my oldest daughter at this time. She's 12, and she and I started raising her how I was raised. And with this process of learning about all of this and being humble and really evaluating and all of the conditioning, all of my past learning history, and just kind of deconstructing that and just looking at it from my own perspective, and then bringing in all of these principles that I've now, since then been learning about behavior and what motivates behavior, and the downsides and the negatives of punishment, and just all of this. I could go on forever on the parenting side of it. I started bringing this into my parenting, and then I also started really reflecting on this in regards to spirituality and my relationship with Christ and with God. And I'm still on that journey. I don't have like any answers as far as that goes. It's been a long process, and also another humbling and vulnerable experience as well. But I have learned so much from working with my horses and learning to really embrace being open to change and open to just that everything is not always black and white, that there's a lot of variability and there's a lot of nuance in our day-to-day lives, and looking at just the world through a different set of lenses. Like I grew up thinking the world is very, and of course I'm a firstborn too, and this also plays a role in this. I'm like a rule follower, and like the world is this way and you must do this and you must do that, which is why I kind of bought into really bullying horses so quickly. I'm like, of course, if my trainers tell me to do this, I must do it. And then considering also my upbringing with authority and all that, I'm like, of course, if they say it, I must do it. And learning all about behavior and learning about the nuance in behavior, and learning to see antecedents and the world and all the context with all that, and how that sets up behavior to happen, and then how behavior is then reinforced, and then how that leads into the next behavior and the next reinforcement, and it just keeps going and going, has really played a huge role in not only my parenting, but how I live my day-to-day life and how I look at interacting with other people, and then also how I'm treating myself too. And so it's entirely changed my worldview. Let's just put it that way. Like everything has shifted, everything has changed, and my perspective is very, very different, and my views are very, very different than how they were before I started working with horses in this way. So it definitely has a domino effect. It definitely rolls over and bleeds over into the rest of your life for sure.
That's incredible. It's interesting you bring up the parenting thing, because I have heard Dad say like very similar things about the horses and spiritual journey and parenting and how it has helped him, I guess, rather become a better father. And I mean, to say within the past, few months to a year, I've seen drastic changes in him. I think a lot of it is thanks to the horses because of the time that he has spent with them and that we have spent with them. And I don't know, it's interesting that you bring up the parenting thing because I hear you on that for him.
You're on the other
Yeah, I
side of it.
agree.
I am.
Yeah, I agree. Horses just they've helped revolutionize the way I see life, and to me, it's not dependent on any particular religion
Yeah.
or belief system or dogma, and that's essentially what I hear you saying. Do you think that they live in perhaps a different realm of existence to where they kind of have this free flowing way that humans, it seems like, and I know this is a leading
Yeah, it's
question,
okay.
but it seems like humans are more, yeah, black and white, like you mentioned. Doesn't it seem that the horses just sort of live in a gray area?
I think that horses live for peace and survival and harmony amongst themselves. So they have a very different social structure than we have largely been raised. Like our culture and our society is very high. I can't even say that word today. We're hierarchy based, right? And, leaders are often thought to be extremely dominant and assertive and aggressive, and they get their way. And we even, for a long time, have looked at the horse herds and thought, oh, there's the leader. There's the most aggressive horse, and there's the leader. When in fact, that's not the case at all. And there's not a single leader. And usually, if there is going to be a horse that the rest of the herd kind of follows or goes along with, it's usually the matriarchy of the family band. So they're usually more of a family structure. Let's put it that way. And it's only because she's been around longer, she's wise, she knows where the food is, she knows where the water is, and so they're like, oh, this is good access to reinforcement. We stay all together. There's safety in that, and so they move all together and they coexist all together very peacefully. And it is very different, how a herd is supposed to be based on what we've studied in feral herds versus what we see commonly in domestic herds. If you only study domestic herds, then yes, you're going to see the highly aggressive horse that is we perceive as like the leader, and that's not the case. They're just the most aggressive horse. They are the biggest bully in the herd. and that's not a healthy way for them to be. There's something going on there we need to evaluate and consider. So anyway, going back to people, I think that we tend to just, I think there's so much to unpack here. And I think we can learn, I'll put it this way, I think we can learn a lot from horses, that we need to work very hard to want to coexist with each other peacefully and understand each other and be less prone to like being the most aggressive one in the room and going after each other and having to be right all the time and having to be the most dominant, the most assertive, and learning to just slow down and feel our emotions and embrace them, and then also learn how to move past them, or not past them, but just like keep moving forward. I think there's a lot that we can learn from horses, but I also think that there's complexities to the human brain that horses don't have based on what we have as far as science goes, where that changes some of our social dynamics and how we live our lives, and has allowed us to create a very complex society with lots of nuance and lots of differences from the horse kind of culture. And so they're more peaceful, more simple, not in a bad way, simple, like things are about survival. It's about getting to tomorrow. It's about living in today. It's about living in this moment, coexisting with each other peacefully, and getting to the next day. And so their life, their existence is much more straightforward, much more simple. And we can learn a lot from them, especially considering how we live now, where everything is so fast paced and so complex and just so overwhelming. And we're so prone to burnout and just getting up in everybody else's business. And with social media, just throwing things at each other, throwing words at each other constantly. There's a lot we can learn from them.
I hear that. So I was brought up in the horse industry that I mean, like you've mentioned, we have to be the boss. I was also taught to kind of let go of my emotions, like go practically numb, because if the horse feels anything, it could trigger a response, and the horse isn't, I guess you don't want the horse to feel what you're feeling. However, it's been my experience that it's actually very beneficial for her to feel what I'm feeling, especially when I'm riding. As a teacher for both horses and humans, what is your take on emotion as far as spending time with the horses go?
Such a good question. So I was also taught the same way. Um, check your emotions at the gate. You're totally neutral robot mode. And I have seen some really negative side effects from that kind of approach. The biggest one being that we can't just ignore our emotions. We are, we have emotions. We're an emotional beings, just as they are. And we feel them. They are there. They are in our body. Our body is feeling them, whether or not we are acknowledging them consciously. So when we say, check your emotions at the gate, turn it off, be numb, whatever, all we're doing is shutting down a part of ourselves and ignoring it just for it to potentially flare back up at an unideal time, and or to spiral or to get worse. And we're expecting ourselves to be completely neutral in this situation, and that's just not possible, and that's not healthy either. So what I tend to teach, and what I do for myself too, is I actually teach people to really sit with themselves and acknowledge how they're feeling, name it, feel it, spend time with it for a while. And then if you're going to go work with your horse, so this is where, making a conscious decision before you go work with your horse is really important here, because there are going to be some days where you're really stressed and anxious and your brain's moving a million miles an hour, or you're feeling fearful, or you're just a ball of nerves and anxiety. That's not going to be the day that we go out and work on, exposing our horses, or, desensitizing to a scary flag, or working on a really complex and hard behavior that we've been struggling with in the past. Those are the days we're going to say, okay, I acknowledge how I feel today. I'm going to respect that. And I'm going to go just sit with my horse and spend time with them in the pasture and just have no expectations time. That's what I usually call it. And just have that relationship building time. We're just being here. I'm going to be in your environment, and just spend time together. And then if we come into that day though, and we're like, oh, I'm feeling really good today. I'm really motivated. I'm focused. I feel really balanced. I can kind of feel my emotions and regulate them. Then that's a really good day to go work on those new behaviors, those complex ones, or this potentially scary behavior, or go work on the scary corner of the arena. I think we need to be mindful of two things. One, I think, like I said, feeling your emotions, acknowledging them, and working with them in a healthy way is very, very important. But the other side of this too is that our horses co-regulate with us really well. They sense how we're feeling, and they know how we're feeling. And we don't need to be putting them in a situation, or ourselves in a situation, where we're not going to be able to assist them in any way. I think as the human in this situation, where we've put our domestic horses in a human environment and we're asking them to do very human oriented things in a controlled phase where they can't hurt us, or they're not supposed to, we need to take responsibility for ourselves and our part in this whole equation, and be mindful of how we're feeling, and be supportive towards them. So we need to come into the interaction understanding that our role is to be supportive towards them, to be a guide for them in this environment and in this context. So definitely not the shutting your emotions off, but leaning, and I teach more towards acknowledging and embracing how you're feeling, and then being conscious and responsible with how you choose to engage with your horse after that point. Yeah.
Love that.
That is, yeah, beautiful, and that resonates with me on so many levels.
Yeah, that's great. Do you use any sort of techniques to say, get yourself in that state of mind or being? When you say, I love that you mentioned our emotions, and by simply just kind of turning them off, what you're alluding to is that's a cognitive response, part of our brain action. And then you mentioned that our emotions are actually stored and live within inside of our body, whether we like it or not. And that's well known in psychotherapy and all sorts of different things. So, in acknowledging that, do you teach or go into any ideas on how to kind of prepare your body and your mind to kind of go into harmony in those ways before or even after working with you?
Yeah. Or even in the middle of training. Sometimes I'll have to, and
Yeah,
even for myself, this
right.
happens all the time where I'm like, okay, that frustrated me a little bit. I need to step back here and, really evaluate and regulate and get back to where I want to be, or call it a day. That's fine too. And that's the thing, like part of it is shame too. We tend to like, oh, I'm not feeling, up to it today. And then we start shaming, guilting ourselves into like, no, you just need to suck it up and do this. And you shouldn't feel this way. And that has no place in this either, because our body still feels it and our horses still sense it. So you can shame yourself all you want, but it's not going anywhere. Um, anyway, so yeah, so what I work with my students on and myself is different breathing exercises, and really slowing down. So learning to kind of slow your mind down, which is really hard for like I have like ADHD, and so my brain's just moving a million miles an hour all the time and always multitasking and doing a million things. So I've had to work really hard at grounding and being present and learning to feel my body. And actually, and learning where I feel my emotions in my body too. That's been really helpful as well. I feel my emotions in particular parts of my body. And so when I can check in with my body, I can be like, oh, that's interesting. I'm feeling anxious because this part of my body feels this way. And so learning to be able to do that and going through that exercise outside of the context of training, and then bringing that in to before you work with your horse and checking in with your body and your mind and your conscious while you're actively training throughout. And then at the end is going to be a really important exercise. And I'm not pretending to be a professional or an expert in this area. Sometimes I do recommend to clients that they work with an expert or professional therapy counselor or somebody who can help them learn to really tap into all of this and help themselves work through this at a deeper level than I can. But when I'm working with students in the context of we're going to be working with your horse today, I understand, because I work with a lot of people that horses have been dangerous towards them in the past. And so they're storing a lot of that fear, rightfully so. That learning history, my horse has kicked me in the past when we've done this, or my horse has bitten me in the past when we've done this, or bolted or whatever. That's all there. Like your brain remembers it and your body remembers it. And so we spend a lot of time building a new reinforcement history, so new experiences, and also checking in with how they're feeling, what they thought about that situation, being really transparent about it. Even if it all went well, but you're still feeling anxious, that's okay. Tell me about it. Let's talk about it. Let's name it. Let's identify it. And let's think about solutions or ways that we can help you feel even more comfortable. So yeah, there's a lot of different types of practices that I will bring into working with my students based on the situation and based on what I feel they will respond best to as well, to assist them and then ultimately also assist their horse too.
You have a really calm energy about you.
Thank you.
That I can feel. It's just, yeah. So clearly that would resonate, throughout your work with the horses. And Alyssa and I, we've talked a lot about trauma, and not only trauma that or we've had to deal with ourselves in our own individual lives, but also the trauma of that of the horse. Mm-hmm. And do you have any insight on trauma as it relates to the horse and even humans?
Yeah. I'm careful labeling, because we can't sit a horse down and really talk to them and really, get their interpretation of what's going on. We have to be careful really labeling responses with human terms and just projecting stuff onto them. And so I There are definitely times where I do truly believe that this horse has significant behavioral injury, significant trauma that they are storing, physically, mentally. I can see it, I can feel it. Sometimes I can just be around a horse and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I just met this horse and I can feel all of it. And it's not unlike with people where we really have to start where they feel comfortable and feel safe, and we have to build that relationship, build that trust, and cultivate that relationship, and then allow them to start expressing how they feel, and then show them they're safe, even though they express that. And sometimes we don't always like how they express it. And this is where it's hard to work with horses that have that much trauma that they're carrying from their history. I have one case in particular. She lives with me now as a permanent resident of my herd, and she's actually the favorite of all of the students that come and work with my horses. You would never believe me. Like if you just walking up to her and meeting her, she's loose around the barn. She comes up and she says hi to everybody. She's super chill. She's the favorite of all the kids. She teaches all my beginner lessons, and she's this big 17 hand high warm blood, and she's beautiful. But oh my goodness, that mare, when I started working with her, it was dangerous. She used to rear, spin, and then kick out both hind legs like at the person that was leading her. And she would pin you up against objects like walls and fencing and keep going at you, trying to kick at you. She would also throw riders, and she was not safe to be around at all. And she was on a hair trigger, meaning like sometimes I didn't even know what set her off. Like just something would happen, and it was some sort of trigger to her past, and she would go from 0 to 60, and there was almost no warning, very few warning signs as far as behavior goes. It didn't escalate slowly. It went from 0 to 100 really is what happened. And so she's one of those cases where it took a long time. And I'll just be honest, it was like 2 years before I felt like we were all the way down to the core, and she was really trusting and really doing so much better. And yeah, so with trauma with horses, that explosive behavior that she was demonstrating early on, of course I didn't want her to be in a situation where she expressed any of that, and I tried my absolute best to never put her in that situation where she felt like she had to protect herself, where she had to lash out. However, I didn't always know what the triggers were, and we were trying to sort things out, so there was a little bit of trial and error in the beginning. And then as I got to know her better and know what her triggers were and all that, it got a lot safer because I was able to manage her environment better. And then I was able to really build her trust during that process, and then start gradually reintroducing her to the things that would trigger her before, in a way that she felt safe. But in those beginning stages, especially, it'd be so easy to punish her for those and to be like, she's, being dominant, she's being aggressive, you need to put her in her place. And we don't often like how horses express when they're upset, when they're really revealing how they feel about it. So when you're dealing with horses that have all of this history, when they're really storing so much and they have so much that has been done wrong to them in the past, and they're just carrying that with them in the early stages in the beginning, and sometimes later on, how they choose to express that when I kind of use the word unpacking, but you can use different words. We're peeling back the onion layers, all that. It's not always pretty. It's not always fun. It's not going to be a beautiful, like, oh yeah, we just started clicker training, it's all great. Like, no, it's sometimes quite volatile. It's quite, can be a little bit dangerous. But my goal as a behavior consultant who is pursuing a Lima humane hierarchy approach to working with all horses and setting them up for success is never to put them in that situation. I do my absolute best so that they feel safe every step of the way, just like you would experience with a really good, therapy counselor or somebody. Their job is really to put you in that safe place where you feel like you can open up, where you can start talking, and we can start peeling back those layers. And it's not always pretty, but it is necessary to really start the healing process. So that healing process is not always rainbows and butterflies. It's ups and downs, quite a bit of ups and downs.
Definitely. I love that. And you said something that really came to mind for me about expression. And so horses are big in reference to humans, just physically, their size are, they're big, they're forceful, they can be forceful, they can kill us really, really easily. And it seems that they bring out a lot of fear in us. And by virtue of them expressing what's going on in their body and mind and being, and they're almost like a catalyst for us to deal with and sort out our own fears.
If we're open to it.
Yeah. And that's something that I experienced with Tiger.
So on
Go
that,
ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say, like, on that note, like, um, tell us about your relationship with fear and how that's played out
Yeah.
in your work with horses.
So my mare Tiger, she was also a big catalyst for me working through a lot of fear that I had with horses. And some of it wasn't, it was almost like secondhand fear. Like it had been so ingrained in me from such an early age that should I let the horse have even an inch, they would take a mile, right? And they would hurt me at the first chance they got. They're always looking for an opportunity to get one over on you. Like literally, that's things that people would tell me all the time. And these were big name trainers. These were not just, backyard, terrible trainers. These were big name trainers. And I'm like, now I'm looking back going like, do we even like horses? Like half the time people talk to me about horses and I'm like, do you like horses? Like it's a genuine question. Like, do you actually like them? And then also brings up the question of like, I think people are genuinely quite afraid of horses, and a lot of people are. Which, considering how we've been handling horses for forever now, and how forceful and terrible our methods have been, it doesn't really surprise me because it is considered standard to get on a young horse and have a bronco show, right? So we're taught from like the very early age. We see all this stuff, and we watch other trainers and all that. The horses are out to get us. They are super dangerous and you have to be ready. You have to one up them all the time. You always have to be ready. And so, I'd had a couple falls and stuff, but nothing super serious. I did have one horse. He was very dangerous towards the end. It was actually a really sad story. In the very end, he could only be walked out of his stall with a nose twitch on and a chain, like a really big chain on his nose. And we ended up having to put him down because he was in such incredible amounts of pain. So he was in so much pain. He was really angry and upset. And so it was the cycle. Anyways, I wish I could go back and fix that whole situation, or not even fix it, but just make it a little bit better. Like there's so much I know now that I didn't know then that I wish I'd known. And I feel, it's hard. It's hard when you have situations like that, you look back on and you feel guilty about them. And, but he taught me a lot, and I'm able to, in retro, I'm able to look back on that situation with him and that experience and take all that information and move forward and take that learning to now. So I'm very grateful for that. Anyway, so I never had any like traumatic experiences with horses, just some generally kind of dangerous behavior around horses, probably that I instigated without even knowing it for the most part. And then all of that conditioning that horses are dangerous. And so fast forward to working with my mare Tiger. And I remember the first time that I went true, like fully tactless and fully at liberty with her. And I was genuinely scared. Like I have a memory of like, okay, I'm going to get on this horse completely tactless today, and being super nervous and super anxious. And it went beautifully. She was such an angel. She took care of me. But considering, all the bucking, rearing, and bolting she had done with me in the past, it made sense from a survival nervous system brain perspective, where my body's like, this one isn't safe. Like your learning history tells you that this one does dangerous things. But not telling you guys that anybody should just go jump on tackless and it'll be fine. I did a lot of work. I mean, I think we had been working together for like 4 years at this point or more. So there was a lot of prep that went into this, and it was very gradual. And I remember that experience, and I remember coming away from that experience thinking that fear that I was holding on to, and that understanding that horses were always going to take advantage should I give them the opportunity. Holding on to that was really holding me back and really clouding my view of horses and causing me to always have a backup plan of some way that I could force them to do this, or some way that I could trap them into this, or some way that I could make this happen should it need to happen. This is a lot of times the argument that goes into using more aversive equipment like bigger bits or bits at all, or even bridles, period. I mean, I ride tackless or in a neck rope a lot these days, and the equipment itself is not keeping you safe. It's the training and that relationship that's keeping you safe. And so, but I didn't. It was hard to believe that. Like, my head knowledge told me that was true, but also I didn't believe that at a core level until I really experienced it. And so, learning to trust the process, trust my training, and that I had done my homework, and that I had done the work, that I had worked with the professionals, that I had been consistent, that I had built this relationship with this horse, and that I had done the work, and the horse had done, a lot with me, and we had this whole experience together. And then learning to just really embrace that relationship and not be constantly waiting for this horse to take advantage of me or have that one up on me was another really big pivotal moment in my horsemanship journey. And it so much changed after that point. And so I stopped really looking at horses as this being that was constantly out to get me, even if I wouldn't ever say it that way at the time. It's just kind of how it was. To horses are responding to their environment and also based on their learning history. And if a horse is responding in a dangerous way, it's not because they're trying to get one over on you. It's because something is going on for them and they're responding in a way that makes sense to them. And we need to modify or change or help them in some capacity so they don't feel the need to respond that way anymore. And that's on us to do, not on them. And they're not trying to get one over on us. So yeah, that's been huge for my horsemanship journey.
I love it. Has that newfound awareness, or when it was newfound, has that reciprocated into other areas of your life outside of horses? Meaning that awareness of fear and your approach to those things.
Yes. One, I can understand myself more. And when I am feeling anxious or fearful or even angry or anything, I can sit back and really evaluate, okay, where is this coming from? What has led us to this point? What are possible things in the history, my history that have, led me to respond in this situation this way? And then also when dealing with other people and working with people, this is one of the ways I'm able to really cope with how, with social media and working with people all over the world. And then just dealing with people on social media and just how hostile that can be, right? I used to be that it was like, oh, this person is arguing with me, and you want to just like lash back at them, right? You just want to like get back at them, or you're feeling like they're attacking you. I don't know. There's just these cycles that happen, right? Social media can be really toxic. But I've been able to learn, and it's come from my horsemanship work and journey, to really sit back and realize that this person is responding in a way that makes sense to them based on antecedents, based on their learning history, based on what's going on. How have maybe I played a role in this? Is there something I could have said differently? And it's not always, on me to change other people. I'm not saying I need to change other people's behavior, but I can evaluate myself objectively and what I've done and haven't done objectively to see if I can maybe improve it going forward. And this has been really helpful with that. And it's been extremely helpful with parenting as well, because I think a lot of parents and a lot of people growing up with that more authoritarian approach, there's this kind of unspoken, sometimes spoken thing that these children are trying to get one over on us, that they're trying to take advantage of us. They're trying to assert themselves. They're trying to be difficult, whatever it is. There's lots of different terms people use. He's being a brat, all of this stuff. And I have learned how to I'm still working on this. I'm not perfect by any means, but step back and be like, why is my son responding in this way? Is there something in the environment that has cued this? Is there something in the learning history? How could I have helped? How could I make this better in the future? How can I help him now? Um, yeah, I think there's a lot that can be taken away from everything that I've learned with horses to the rest of my life. Like I said, it's changed pretty much everything. I feel like a very different person than I used to be.
That's great. I absolutely love it.
Yes.
There's so much that resonates with me.
Oh, yes.
What you're talking about.
Well, given this is a Reinforce the Horse podcast, what is your favorite way to reinforce your horse or your horses?
Well, I do lots of, positive reinforcement, and I usually use some sort of food reinforcer, but also a lot of my horses like scratches. One of my mares will just love you forever and follow you around everywhere if you give her some scratches. And I've had to tell like body workers and farriers that come in, I'm like, don't scratch her. I know you want to. I know you want to scratch her because she's just so tempting to scratch. And you just want to love on her, but wait until after the appointment, because once you start, she will not let you stop. So I find different ways that my individual learners, my individual horses, which is how reinforcement works, right? We have to find what is reinforcing for the individual. And I work with that. So they each have their individual preferences that I try and incorporate as much as possible.
That's so great. Are you familiar with Carolyn Rudson?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, and so in her book, Naked Liberty, I remember her talking about the herd of wild horses that she visited as a child, and each one was so like individual. So like one would like the scratches, another one would just like to spend time with her, just standing with them. The other one would like to go on a walk, and she had to figure out their individual desires and what kind of made them tick individually, so that she wasn't getting kind of like immersed or rather taken over by a herd of horses who wanted her full attention.
Yeah, that can happen especially if you don't have anything. Like my guys, I work with food with all of them, but they all know, when my training pouch goes on, they come and stand with me quietly. So even if I'm in the middle of a herd of them, they all come and stand quietly with me. And then they know that's, but if you don't have that established, it could very easily turn into a not so safe situation. So having the good training on board and having that back and forth dialogue with that horse, and so they understand you and you understand them, is so important for having effective training, but not just effective, but just like ethical and relationship based training and interactions.
That's so great. Yeah, and like what we say, Alyssa and I, communication, not control. And so in that way, of course, we use a lot of what we would call positive reinforcement or treat training or what have you, but we use hay pellets as well. So it's not like they're getting some candy all the time. And it's really just more about communication and giving up control and realizing that we don't effectively have control over them ever, nor do we want to. And even more so, the more we can control ourselves, and whether physiologically, spiritually, emotionally, or otherwise, the more they're open to acknowledging us and being with us. So that pulls out a lot.
Yeah, I think the control idea, that's such a... So we talk about in the behavior world that choice and control could be argued as a primary reinforcer. So up there with food, with shelter, with water, all that. Like it is necessary for quality of life, for thriving in life. And our horses also really thrive on being able to control outcomes and their environment. Yet the power dynamic is so off balance. And here with people and horses, they have little control over anything in their life. They don't get to pick their food. They don't get to pick their herd companions. They don't get to pick where they live. They don't get to pick when they go into the stall versus when they go out. They don't get to pick what discipline they do. They don't get to pick which when they're ridden, when they're not, how long the training session. I mean, I could go on forever, right? What do they have choice over? They don't really, except for maybe some time to graze. They get to pick which blade of grass to go to and then when to go get water. There's maybe a few other instances, but it's very, very small amounts of control that they have in their day-to-day life. And so, um, and I think this really speaks to the human need to really control, and that it's a primary reinforcer for us too. Like, we really want to control outcomes, and it's fine, it's reasonable, that's part of how we're built. And but we take it and we really run with it, and we have so much power over these animals that are really subject to us and don't really have a choice to be here or to do what we want to do. And so, big part of what I want to do with my horses, and part of my relationship with my horses, or like the primary part, is I want it to be a mutually beneficial, mutually reinforcing, and mutually choice driven interaction together. I want them to have just as much choice in the interaction and just as much choice and control over the outcomes as I do when we are in a interaction with each other, whether it's training or just hanging out together. I want them to be able to have equal say in that experience, short of like an emergency situation. There's always damage control in emergencies, and I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about your everyday kind of interactions. And what's really cool is if you do your homework and really put the work in, and you really build that relationship, and you really build the trust piggy bank. This is an analogy we use quite often, like depositing trust little coins into the piggy bank, so that when those emergencies do come up and you do have to assume control for their safety, for them to survive, for you to survive, whatever it is, they go, okay, interesting. I'm going to go ahead and trust this person because we have such a long trust history. We have so much trust in the piggy bank that they're willing to do it, and they do, and it's amazing. And it's even better than, this is what always gets me too. People are hesitant to give up control because they're afraid that once they do, they will get no compliance and no obedience, and it will be dangerous and all of that over on this side of, the other side of the equation, when the horse has a lot of control or a lot of say in the situation. When in reality, I have found that it's actually the opposite. My horses are safer. They comply more readily when I need them to, like when it's an emergency, when I have to do it, and are quicker to recover from stressful events, and are less likely to have very volatile outbursts or to refuse or to be dangerous, because I give them so much control over the interactions on a day-to-day basis than ever before. And you have to remember, I have a very long training history of doing things the way before, with more, with the horse not having any say, with them just being totally obedient and compliant. So it's been so cool to watch that those relationships really develop. And I tell people all the time, it's so hard to imagine and to feel like to imagine what that would be like. You really have to, well, it's hard to imagine. You really have to go and experience it. My young mare, she's 7 now, but her name's River. And sometimes I feel like I'm working with another person. Like, we're having this back and forth dialogue. It's so nuanced. And she has all the say in the world in this conversation. She can opt out at any time. We have specific opt-out behaviors and opt-in behaviors, or start buns and stop buns. And it's just this really cool conversation, and it's multi-layered. It's so multifaceted as well. And I have never before, even in my other clicker trained horses, but they have other history with people. So we've had to spend a lot of time working through that, and they have that old history of people. But when she started completely from scratch as a 4.5-month-old with this way of training, I've never worked with a horse that is so intelligent and has so much autonomy and so much choice, and understands nuance and complexity, and just this really deep conversation, this dialogue that we can have back and forth. And it's really addicting. It's a lot of fun. And I wish more people could experience it, because you'd never go back. That's my experience anyways. I'm never going back.
All I can say is yes.
Yeah.
I totally,
I
know Alyssa's
totally,
just
yeah. Oh
glowing
no,
about
I
that.
feel it, like, I feel it so much. I took my Mustang Willow practically wild. I mean, she came to me, she was supposed to be tip trained or gentled. She was terrified, like very scared when she came home. I couldn't go near the pen without her bolting and, running and trying to get away kind of thing. And now this horse, I mean, she shares a paddock, about an acre paddock with two other horses, and she will like whinny at me when she sees me walking around, and I'll like go out there to her and she'll run up to me, and she is like, she asks me to get on her and ride her, and if I'm like, no, Willow, I don't have my helmet on, or I can't for this reason, she's like, no, no, like, no, we're riding. Like, dude, seriously? And it's one of those, like, it's always been a dream for me to have that sort of relationship with a horse. Because you see it in like television shows. It's like, oh, the horse is asking me to ride, the horse is laying down with me, the horse is doing this, that, and the other thing. We're communicating. But before Willow, I've never like seen it in person. I've never really experienced it. And so to like have that conversation with her and the connection with her is like, it's literally
Yeah.
magic.
And that's what's so weird. We watch all these movies and read all these books and we're like, that's what we want. And then we go do this other thing. And that's totally counter.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, no, stop that.
Yeah.
We need to do this over here. It only took me, forever to get here, but we're here now. So I'm very grateful.
We are.
So great. It's like humans, we have so much to learn, and definitely so many other species can teach us a lot. It's not just horses, but the horses are so illuminating in the way that they allow and be. And just, I love how you just acknowledge the fact that largely they have absolutely no choice. Even well-intentioned people, just by virtue of the logistics around their keeping and safekeeping and care, they often just have absolutely no choice. And to be able to, I guess the question for you in that way is, what can like a person or people do who have horses, and maybe they're listening to this podcast and they're like, well, this sounds all good, but like, can you give a golden nugget perhaps of like, what can they do? What step could they take right now that might be able to shift them in this direction if they're interested?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So many golden nuggets that I could. Well, if we're going down the choice route, like if you want to start providing your horse with some level of choice and control, and helping them really thrive in their environments and experience that. So many horses that have been in training, I just rescued a horse and she's about 18, and this horse, she's the sweetest thing on the planet. Oh my gosh, she is a heart of gold. But she has no independent thought. Like, it's so odd. After, I've worked with many horses that are like this, but she's in my herd, and seeing her amongst the rest of my herd that are very independent, very vocal individuals that have autonomy and choice and all of this stuff. She's just kind of compliant and okay, and just really, she lacks a lot of animation when it comes to life. She's just kind of surviving, right? She's not in that really thriving kind of state. And so I ask her to engage in a, clicker training session or something, and she's having a hard time catching on because it involves independent offering of behavior that is not physically prompted or manipulated. A lot of creative thoughts. And I don't want to put human terminology and projection too much on the horses, but it kind of gives the idea of like, I'm just careful with the words like creative and all that, but she just is like, you need to show me what to do, or else I'm just going to stand here, because otherwise I will get corrected, because that's what her learning history tells her. And I see this all the time, and it's very sad. Anyway, so going back to it, so with a horse like her, she's a good example, because I think a lot of people are going to run into working with horses like this, because it's very common. Enrichment is your best friend. Finding puzzles, and there's really inexpensive enrichment DIY kind of stuff that you can find on Pinterest. There's also different websites. If you search like enrichment horses or enrichment equines, you'll find different websites that have really inexpensive DIY stuff. Little things that they can figure out, scattering pellets around, scattering hay around, creating little puzzles, little enrichment boxes where they have to tear apart the boxes to get to the food. Like, just this stuff there. They have to get creative. They have to explore movement. They have to explore different kinds of behavior. They're not just living the same day in and out and in and out, and then, having no choice in the rest of their life. These types of activities for them can really get their brain thinking, can really stimulate that part of, the brain, and can help them feel better in their environments too. It's also really good for like an anxiety relief or stress relief, give them something to do. So that'd be my first recommendation, is to start involve a lot of enrichment in your day-to-day life with your horse. Even if you go out like tomorrow, let's say you're not feeling well and you're a little under the weather, don't ride. Give them some enrichment. It's fine. They're gonna thrive with that. Don't feel bad about not riding. So that's one of my first recommendations I have. I will say a little caveat to that. Start off where your horse can be successful. Don't frustrate them. So it might be really, really basic. Like you might have a box that's just open and there's like a pellet right inside of it. Like it's super easy to find. That's fine. Start there and then gradually increase the difficulty as they're able to be successful. And just do this as often as you can. It doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't have to be 24/7. Just, a couple times a week or once a week even. It's fine. Better than nothing. Another thing that I would recommend is starting to observe your horse more objectively, with the understanding that any behavior that they are performing, anything they are doing, is serving a purpose, has a function, and that it is not meant to, annoy you or be harmful to you. It is very much about them just trying to do the best with the situation. So they are just trying to survive in their environment. So avoiding labeling our horses with terms like bossy or bully or bratty or marish and things. Instead, stepping back and being like, okay, my horse is bumping into me repeatedly while leading. Is instead of saying the word, oh, she's being, pushy, what is she maybe instead doing? Like, what does this behavior serve? Like, how does it serve the horse? What is the function of this behavior? Was it something maybe that I accidentally taught them? Are they maybe dealing with a physical problem? I've known many neurological horses that bump into their handlers repeatedly, and that's one of the first signs of the neuro problem well before it's diagnosed by a vet. Maybe they're anxious and nervous and you've got them in between the scary thing and you. And so they're bumping into you because they're trying to get away from the scary thing. Like there's a lot of different reasons why a horse could be doing something like that. So avoiding using terminology that implies that the horse is being purposely difficult is going to be another really helpful thing. And then the third tip, and this will be my last one, is start exploring maybe something fun and creative, like train some tricks with clicker training. It's really fun to do. You don't have to do it for everything. You don't have to give up riding and competitions and retrain your horse completely. You can do something completely separate from all of that. Like let's say you have your riding lessons on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or whatever, once a week, maybe it's Monday, and you ride those other days. But then on Saturday, you like to come out in the morning and just hang out with your horse. Maybe part of that hanging out time is you do a little bit of a clicker training session. You teach your horse to smile. You teach them to touch a target. You teach them to stand on an object. There's a lot of different things you can do. This is something that I teach in my courses, is when people first start, I encourage them to separate the clicker training, the positive reinforcement training, from everything else and keep doing what you're doing, the rest of it, unless it's super problematic, unless the horse is screaming at you that they need to stop. Let's just explore clicker training and positive reinforcement on the side. Let's get your skills acquired. Let's help your horse understand what's going on. And then you can run with it wherever you want to from there. But this activity, even if that's only ever as far as you go, is teaching a few tricks, is so much fun. It really gets your horse thinking. It gives them a choice. It gives them it starts conditioning your relationship too. It starts creating positive associations with you being around because awesome things happen. So it can help build that relationship. And it's a lot of fun for people too. I think it helps them start to learn about behavior more and observing their horses more objectively and starting to have fun with their horses again. Kind of taps back into that like childhood, like I want to just have fun with horses and be around horses and do fun things with them. I think it's really beneficial. So that would be my third tip.
Those are so great.
They really
That's
are.
fantastic. I absolutely love those. So on that note, you've mentioned a lot about you have training courses and whatnot. You work with people all over the world. I assume most of that is virtually. How can people find you, Adele?
The best place to find me would be on my website, so thewillingequine.com. And from there, you can find all the links to, I have my own podcast, my blog, my YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all of that, as well as my courses.
Perfect.
So, yeah, my website would be the best place to start.
Awesome. And we'll definitely create links for people to find. And as we share on the social media about you, I didn't realize you had a podcast. What is
It's
it?
just The Willing Equine.
Maybe I did.
It's the business name.
Oh, yeah, I did hear it. I've listened to a number of. I didn't know that was. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, no, I've been doing that podcast for a while.
Right.
I think I started it like in 2018, 2000, something like that. Anyway, I haven't done it this year though. That's probably why I've been really, really busy. So I put it on the back burner for a little bit now. But I've been doing that podcast for a while, and it's a lot of fun. I don't do as many guest episodes. It's mostly me just talking to nobody and then everybody. But yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure meeting with you and talking with you and all the fun.
Well, thank you for having me.